Hey guys, welcome back to the Bond Report. My name is Chris, aka the Bearded Blofeld. So today is going to be a little different because today is the finale of my 007 Road to a Million interview series. And some may say that I have saved the best for last. Now, before I bring my guest in, I do want to let you know there's a couple things that we're going to do different this time. This interview is not controlled by the studios. Handcuffs are off, all bets are off. Without further ado, let me bring in and introduce two-time author and director of 007 Road to a Million, Jaime Goold. Jaime, welcome.
Hi there. Nice to meet you, Mr. Bearded Blofeld. How are you today? Are you well?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a good morning here. You say you're currently traveling, is that right?
Yeah, I live between Amsterdam and London. I've got a family in Amsterdam and I work a lot in London, so I'm often doing this trip.
And I see it looks like we're having our cozy morning coffee in the kitchen. Would that be correct?
Indeed, here we go. Like I'm settling down for a nice chat about all the hard work we did this year. Yeah, it's this is the good bit. This is the fun bit, actually.
Right. Because all the work's done now. Now you just get to talk about it and reap all the benefits.
That's right. I mean, I think when people watch the show, they think you must have had such fun, and of course, it's extraordinary to do it. But it's busy, it's stressful. You have to get things right, and it feels like a job. It's work. That means you have to focus and concentrate. And fun is not the most important part of that equation. The other thing I should point out is that I'm one of four directors on the show. Julian Jones is the series director. And there were two or three others, Tom Dumican, Alice Smith, and myself, who did major elements of the filming. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not the director. I am one of a few.
I understand. Okay. I've been excited to talk with you because after watching the show, because I completely binged it in one day
Well,
to get
that's a good
yeah,
start.
yeah, I sat down when this dropped. I went to the theater for the Prime Premiere access and saw the first two episodes. And then from there, that Friday, I came home and I may have sneaked an episode or two at work. Maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. But with you being kind of like the man behind the curtain, I wanted to, kind of pick your brain today. And really thank you also for your time because I know you're busy. I know you're working on other projects. What are you currently doing right now?
Well, I have another show that I do, an international show, an American production that I work on in the Netherlands, and then other jobs come in and out. So I'm a freelancer whizzing between several jobs at once. And we're at a period now after the release of 007 Road to a Million that we're thinking, okay, where's it going? What's next? What can we bring to the table? What ideas have we got? And there's a certain amount of development going on as we speak, forward thinking, and that's also that's a pleasure too.
It's been an exciting run for sure. And I know that looking at your resume, would it be a fair assumption to say that maybe you're a bit of an adventure or adrenaline junkie yourself? And I say that because guys, if you pay attention, he's coming off of Playgrounds of the Rich and Famous from 2021, where you were in St. Bart's. You did an entire episode on that. Then we've got Big Weekend with Greg Wallace, where you were in Amsterdam. That was also in 2021. And then prior to that, you were on Million Pound Holiday Club in 2018. So this kind of seems to be your forte, sir.
Yeah, and before that, I did a lot of travel and a lot of adventuring with a number of other different shows, expeditions. I also was involved in a lot of fishing programs. Finding thing I've done in my career is travel and adventure kind of style stuff, which obviously set me up very well for this series. In fact, I have to say, some of the locations, however crazy they may be, I've actually been to before. I felt like I was
Ah,
retreading my steps once or twice.
oh, that's funny. Knowing this about you, I've put together a series of different questions here for the audience because I feel like there's some questions that are on people's minds. I've been talking with the community over the past couple weeks. Obviously, anybody at home, if you've seen my interview series, you've seen where I've talked to the four major contestant groups. And if you haven't seen those, I'm going to leave a link to that video at the end. So make sure you stick around to that. But, Jaime, I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit deeper with you today and really kind of ask some of the harder questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
as a director, I'm sure that, there were many pre-production meetings with Eon, Barbara Broccoli, Greg Wilson, members of Amazon. Tell us who crafted the challenge questions and why was the decision made to completely omit anything related to James Bond on these questions?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, like the challenge questions are an absolutely vital part of the show, and there was a group dedicated to researching and finding and deciding those questions. A very secret group, I must tell you. Like it was not something that was tightly controlled and secure, involving the head of the company, a question setting specialist, a Bond specialist, a couple of researcher producers who would investigate those questions and prove them and make sure answers were legitimate. So the building of those question elements was taken extremely seriously. So that's how those questions were built. As to why they weren't towards the Bond universe, as the reason that they weren't involving the Bond universe is really to do with the fact that the show originally was a pilot. There was a 30-minute pilot that was made three or 4 years ago. And this was the show in a nutshell, but without any Bond elements. It was a challenge style sequence involving physical challenges, finding places, and finding a question, and then moving to another country. It was superbly entertaining pilot. It was a great template for a new show, something different. And that show was what was introduced to Barbara Broccoli and the Bond people and Eon through the auspices of Amazon, and they reacted to the quality of that pilot. They liked the idea, and it became clear that there was a way of melding a new television idea with a brand and a series of IP and everything that's great about Bond. There was a way to move these two things together. So the result, which took months and months of deliberation and negotiation of how to bring these two things together, that process was not a short one. And of course, that means locations, potentially music. It means cars and stunts and danger and challenge. But it could also mean a whole load of other things. It could mean characters. It could mean villains. It could mean lines of dialogue.
Are you sick?
The bringing together of these two worlds is something that has to be very delicately thought about. And of course, the Eon team were very concerned about how Bond would be used. I think everybody was. And there's a danger of perhaps jumping in too deep. There's a danger of maybe biting off more than you can chew, or using something that could be comedic.
James Bond Jr.
When it wasn't meant to be. I don't know. There are taste dangers there about how to meld those two things together. So the reason I think that the Bond wasn't let into wholeheartedly was a little bit of reticence, a little bit of careful planning, and a sort of a feeling out of how these two worlds could work together. So I think that's the reason. And it's something that people have picked up on in reaction to the show. Like, I think while there are some Bond haters, some people who don't want the Bond world to be involved in this kind of show, there's also a big chunk of audience who say, yeah, where is Bond? Give me more. I want to see more of that. So, balancing those two points of view is tricky. And it may be that in further series we go deeper into the Bond world. I think everybody now knows it works. It can work, and let's play with it a bit more. I think there's an appetite for that now.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, because there were rumor mills on this side of the pond, at least, that the show was in pre-production years before Eon got involved, before Bond was even talked about. And so that makes a lot more sense, hearing that this was something that was officially mapped out as an idea. And then we're adding that IP in, we're adding those different elements in, we're adding people like Brian Cox into the show to give it that extra flair, to give it that personality that is tied to Bond, because there's a feeling with Bond. And I think you captured that in a lot of the moments for the show, especially with the cinematography. They were very keen on drone shots. There was a lot of shots that were down and dark and gritty. There was a little shaky cam involved. So there was a lot of different elements for the viewer at home to be able to visually link Bond to, not just some of the challenges, the stunts, the cars, the locations, which were gorgeous. God, you guys had some absolutely beautiful locations you traveled to in this show. So that makes a lot more sense hearing this now from your end, because I figured that there was something else going on here.
Yeah, I guess had the idea come from Eon Productions, it might have generated itself in a different way. But the idea was developed at 72 Films, who were specialists in television, and it was the presentation of that idea and a pilot that was made to Eon that produced this sort of creative marriage, if you like.
Well, I feel like for a season one of something that has stepped outside of its comfort zone like this, because the Bond franchise has never done anything like this. And for me as a fan, I'm sitting here going, yes, this is exciting, because they are starting to take those risks. They are starting to dive into new areas of entertainment. And whether or not you at home consider season one to be a full-blown success, or it just wasn't for you, maybe it wasn't your cup of tea, the exciting factor is that they are doing new and different things, and it can only go up from here.
Yeah, and who knows what way it will go. We may leap further into the Bond universe, knowing that there's an appetite for that, you know? Let's wait and see. I'm not in a position to say how it's going to be. I don't think anyone knows, but I think people are open to it. And I think you just have to always be a bit careful though about how much whether to introduce characters or villains or actors, or there's a you have to just be careful at what level everybody's comfortable with, and also what works for a reality show. We are creating a world that these people are in, and not make something that starts to play to a gallery and perhaps be too obvious. We don't want to get into pastiche. We want to create an involving challenge show that explores a world that Bond has also explored.
You want to make it welcoming for new people, but you don't want to alienate those new people. And I've said this before in other interviews, is you don't want to alienate them because it's too deep. So the tropes are so specific that, much like with, like, for example, the Marvel universe, if you don't watch all the movies and all the TV shows and then you watch one movie, you go in, you're completely lost sometimes. And it's like, now it becomes homework. And I don't think that doesn't serve a general audience. You're at that point, you've gone too far with fan service.
You mentioned Marvel there. Have we done something that indeed Marvel or another international brand might want to explore? You could find Marvel going down the same route and pushing off into reality, a world that they own have invented. You don't know what way it's going to go. I mean, I think for me, using the Bond films as a launch pad for ideas for locations and stunts. I mean, for instance, climbing that crane is clearly, based on a Bond sequence. The Rio cable car sequence was clearly based on a Bond sequence. Those are the kind of allusions we wanted to make to Bond. rather than slavishly copying it. It was inspiration as much as anything
Well,
else.
and with season one of anything, and I think you could really say this, whether it's maybe the first movie of a franchise or the first season of a series, you're as you're going along with the development of something like this, I feel like it's learning what works, what doesn't work. And then
Yeah.
when you get to the sequel, when you get to season two, you say, oh, okay, we saw what worked, we saw what didn't work, let's improve. And so that's where I get excited about this show as a fan, because I know that this is just the first step in the journey of many.
But I think, like I say, there's an appetite for it.
So with that, tell me, how much freedom did you have to create some of the more dangerous moments for the contestants? And what sequence ended up being the most dangerous, not necessarily for the contestants, but for you and your team? Like maybe behind the camera, where were you guys sitting there going like, "Who, we might be in over our head"?
Um, there were a couple of stunts that sort of jump out at me that I was involved in, and one of them was climbing up the ladder. The Bone brothers have to climb a ladder up the side of the mansion in Venice,
Yes.
and that's like a 7-meter height. And
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this to be particularly scary, but there's a great shot of I think it's Joey Bone on the ladder, and the ladder's kind of going like this because and that those kind of things. I have to say that they are harnessed at that point. Then there's a certain amount of meters off the ground they can go before they need a harness or a helmet or whatever. But that was one that stood out to me as being surprised me at how wobbly and scary that was. And the other one, of course, one spectacular one is the Rio cable car, where he climbs out on the roof of the cable car. And I was presuming that this would be our most dangerous stunt, and the safety guy says pretty much, if he's in a harness and the harness is secure, I don't mind what he does up there, because he knows he can't fall. So that was a nice surprise. The things that you might expect to be the most dangerous, actually, as long as he's harnessed, he's okay.
No, there was a shot I remember in the cable cars where, and it was very, very quick. I had to pause it a couple times to even catch it, but it looked like it was a drone shot, and it looked like it was a moment where he was actually strapped in, he had the harness on, he was going up, and just inside the cable car, it looked like you could see either a cameraman or a safety crew member like crouching down in the car trying to hide behind a panel. And I was like, hey, however they got to do it to get it done.
I mean, it may be true. I haven't seen it myself, and I haven't looked, but it may well be true. I have to say, there must have been 12 of us inside that cable car. We had built blackout blinds on a couple of sections of lower windows, down behind which we were all crouched. And the drone that was shooting it had to kind of maintain a good shot, hiding us all. So it is possible, but maybe you saw someone. I don't know. I like to think it was just a shadow.
It may have been. It may have been.
It genuinely is quite tense, because you think, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know if I myself would go up there and do that. And I think that's where the tension comes from.
Joey was telling me, he said that the cameraman going up the side of the mountain in Rio, because that was my question, was I was sitting here going, we're watching you guys go up the side of this mountain and you're struggling and you're in harnesses and you're doing this. And we see moments where they're getting fatigued and they're slipping. And I'm like, what does the cameraman look like? Because he's got the gear on, he's got even more stuff around him. And he was like, oh no, that guy earned his money that day. He was a champ. I'm thinking, whew.
Yeah, that guy's called Richard Ng. He's very strong, a climber, very good cameraman, and is able to do that climb with a large and heavy camera on and off his shoulder. Now that camera too is rigged to him. It's safe, can't fall, but still, that's a really, really specialized skill. And in fact, Richard was the DOP on the whole of the final episode in Switzerland, another mountain episode.
When I was talking with Beth and Jen, they had to go to a wreckage and dive underwater. And Jen said that she had experience before with scuba diving, and during this shot, during the whole moment of this scene, her mask kept filling up, which was creating some nervousness and some tension for her. Her breathing started to get to a point to where she was borderline going into a panic attack. She had these challenges controlling her breathing, her mask filling up. Why were these kind of real moments of fear and struggle? Why were they cut from the final show? Do you have a statement on that, perhaps?
Well, like I believe she did have a tough time down there, and that's a very scary place to be. Is underwater with water coming into your mask in an unfamiliar environment. If she's underwater, we've got one cameraman down there filming the underwater. That cameraman will have seen elements of what she was going through. He may well have noticed it and filmed it. Her panic would not have been as clear to the camera person as it was to Beth. So while we would have some shots, we wouldn't have that state of fear quite as obviously as you would have if it happened on the surface, right? If she'd run out of breath or fallen or whatever, the footage that you're getting from underwater in that limited environment there would perhaps not be as dramatic. And that may be why it's hard to bring alive her sense of panic when you're not hearing it. You're only seeing it, for one thing. Now, I guess you could, and maybe they did on location, do an interview with her after the fact about what she was going through. She obviously would have had a lot to say about how dramatic that was. But to include that material would have stepped outside of the stylistic choices that the show makes. Like you'll notice in the show, we very rarely cut to interview. There are some interviews that take place before filming to talk about background and motivation. But on location, we never do these kind of on-the-fly interviews. We're not talking to them and throwing questions in at them while they're going through their challenges. That's just a stylistic choice to keep it more filmic, to keep the show all about action rather than explanation. That's just a device. So I suspect the material wasn't there to make the most of that sort of episode, that bit of panic. As a story, it was obviously decided that storytelling-wise, action needs to move on. There are other pressures to bear on what's happening.
Yeah.
So it would have lost, as indeed, like were many, many moments lost in the edit because of the requirements of storytelling. I mean, the whole elements of Beth and Jen's journey in Brazil were also cut, and all the other characters also had cuts in their journey in order to move the stories on. You're seeing a really edited version of what happened. Of course, it's got to come down to 8 hours. And yet, the time in these people's lives, we've got weeks of their lives under stress and doing crazy things. It's all got to come down. And that's just the choices that you have to make.
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder if, and we were talking about this earlier, as you move to the sequel season for season 2, will that possibly be a choice that they make to extend it out to maybe 10, 12, 16 episodes to include more of that storytelling aspect so that so much doesn't hit the cutting room floor? You get a chance to connect more with these contestants on a deeper connection.
This is the discussion that will be going on. What works and what doesn't, there's an algorithm, if you start with 9 people, there's an algorithm to say that after level 1 and 2, you will be down to 4 people, but it could be 6, it could be 1. There's a huge uncertainty with making this show about what's going to happen. And for me, actually, it's one of the nice things about the whole series. It's the way that the 9 comes down to 3 by episodes 6 and 7. The 3 stories start to intercut as they face similar challenges and similar questions. You remember at the party in Jamaica, and you can intercut those stories. And for me, that was one of the nice surprises of the series, was that it took on a life of its own in terms of the storytelling towards the end, and built towards a satisfying conclusion. If that happens again, we don't know. You might be down to 8 couples, 8 pairs might go through to level before. You just don't know. This would be a bit of a logistical nightmare, but it could
Right.
happen.
Yeah, the roll of the dice is going to definitely come into play here for season 2, and I'm excited for it. I am, because as much as I felt like this show fired on a lot of cylinders, it did have some misses. But you have to, with any project coming out of the gate fresh like this, with a new idea, with a new IP, you're gonna have those moments. And I feel like it won more than it lost.
You felt there's a it was a positive exploration of the Bond vibe in a new
Yes.
format.
Yes.
With some reservations. I'd be interested to hear what those are, of course.
It comes down to that collaboration. You've got 72 films, you've got Eon, you've got Amazon, you've got, your crew, you've got the contestants. What are they willing to do? There's a lot of chefs in the kitchen on this. And so from a fan situation, we know that we're sitting back going, well, we want to see more of this. We want to see more action. We want to see, more questions around Bond, and more brands associated with Bond squeezed in. And I love some of the subtle things with the use of Blackwell rum. I love because for a lot of fans out there who are watching the show, maybe you didn't catch that, but especially the general audience isn't going to catch that. So
There was some very subtle Easter eggs, the
Yeah.
Fabergé, literally an egg.
Yeah.
And some of the cars, unusual, unseen, not even
Yeah.
well-known Bond cars that we were putting in there. Yeah, there was a big focus on props and trying to elements of Bond in, which were actually relatively subtle. Even Bond fans weren't getting all of those references. One of the things that we were just talking about, things that could be better or different next time. One of the things my son said to me the other evening was that he felt that sometimes it always felt like they would reach the question, right? So it would look like perhaps they were up against the clock. It would look like it was too difficult, but they would do it. But he sort of felt like it was guaranteed they were going to get to the question. And I think there's some, he would like to see some more danger and some more real struggle when it comes to the challenge elements, and in perhaps even not completing and not getting further, some real jeopardy there. And I think that might be a point that we could get tough. And if someone fails to climb the crane or doesn't do it something in time, then that's the end for them.
Ultimately, yes. They need to start diving into these more things, make it a little bit more treacherous. And I love how you're sitting here going, well, yeah, no, there's a strong likelihood that a lot of these people could not complete these physical challenges and even make it to the question. So, but speaking of questions, what was your most enjoyable moment on the show?
Well, like we said at the beginning of this chat, it's most enjoyable after it's done. That's where that's where you can enjoy it, and in watching it about and what has been achieved. That's where the most fun comes, because of course on location you are often quite stressed about times, weather, schedules, money, crew happiness, contestant happiness. Like all of these things are real stresses. But one of my most memorable moments, I suppose, is along those lines, was after we had shot the cable car sequence, which came towards the end of shoots for me. We were in Rio, months and months of negotiation, and really a lot of money and a lot of difficulty getting into the cable car station and the cable cars at a time when it was not open to a public, which leaves you with about 3 hours in the morning. The setup of that shoot was extraordinary, and the pressure on us at the beginning of that day was very high. And I remember the Bone Brothers at 4 a.m. We were getting to location at 4 a.m. and they were like, "Ooh, nobody's laughing this morning." Like they could tell that something was up, because we were all very, very focused on a really big sequence that we had to achieve. This is like a 10-12 minute sequence in the finished show, and we literally had 3.5 hours to shoot it in. That's not easy at all, and everything has to go right. And the feeling I had after we shot that, well, that was fun. That was like relief. But for me, relief was just wonderful that had gone as well as it did. You know, it's a
Yeah.
very tense and exciting sequence.
So it's fun to hear that that's not something that is only on a small scale for maybe some filmmakers at home, but also as you go up, it's also that kind of pressure there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are also a couple of really memorable, fun moments that perhaps wouldn't register with people in the way that they registered with me. And there are two moments, like at the top of the climb, the Bone brothers are sitting there looking over Rio, and I think Joey says, "Hey, look at the view. You know, that's just like on the card." He said, "Where is the card?" And James pulls it out, and the postcard which they are following comes out of his pocket, and that postcard is destroyed. Like it's falling apart. It's been in his pocket for 3 or 4 days in the same clothes. It's just ruined. Now, for me, that's a moment of real authenticity, you know, and unexpected. I didn't know they were going to do that, but to me, that shows that those guys were really doing it. They weren't faking it. That was their journey, and that was what it did to them. Was the sweat and the energy ruining that card. So for me, that's quite gratifying as a director to see that, because it means we're doing it for real. And there was another kind of silly moment as they are, you know, they're at the top on the cable car station, and they realize they need to kind of get into the control area, and they get to a door, and it's locked, and Joey says, "Oh, what? Do we have a code?" You know, there's a little keypad there, and he puts the code in, and the door releases and lets him in. Like, I mean, for me, the addition of a few little bleeps on that door push and the click and buzz as the door opens, very exciting moments. Like, oh, they're in. But you know, like an hour before that, we glued that pad to the wall, and the door was opened by a producer who just reacting to a thumbs up. And you know, I mean, it's artifice, isn't it? It's a bit like,
There's some behind the scenes for you.
yeah, you know, it's like Star Trek. You remember the Star Trek where the doors would open?
Yeah.
And you know that there's an overweight guy there pulling a string behind the door, but like it's just makes something out of nothing, and I love that. That was pleasing to me to see that door open.
See, that's fun because you have to have some elements that are pre-planned, and you have to have those natural reaction moments. In having that, finding that balance is so important. So I feel like you guys did a good job when it comes to that.
One thing I would just wanted to say on that point was that, you know, there's something very fresh about the reactions of all of our pairs as they go through the challenges. The cameras are on them, and it's nearly always the first take. You know, we're really there. They are really seeing it for the first time, and what you see in their eyes and their reactions are super fresh, and going for the first take and using it is super important to us. And okay, then we back it up with some great shots from other angles in order to make it into as near to a movie as we can make it. But our concentration is always on the authenticity of making it feel and look real, you know, and you know, most of the time, nearly all the time, it really is happening to them at that moment.
Well, that brings us, Jamie, to the point in the show that I like to call
The Evo question.
Now, for everybody at home who has seen my interview series, you guys know that Jamie does not know this question. He has not seen this question. I did not share this question with him. So, Jamie, this is going to be a little bit of a harder one. So, bear with me here. But I did kind of sit down with some friends because I wanted to see some of their reactions to the show as well. And in doing that, you know, when we got to the questions and the answer was chosen, there would be a screen that would pop up, and there would be like the dots. You know, everybody knows the Dr. No dots at this point, and it's kind of counting down, if you will. And in this moment, there was a 12-year-old boy in the room, and we were on, I want to say, episode 4 or 5. It was a few episodes in at this point, and he had been with us through the whole journey as well. And there was a moment where we got to one of these questions, and he said, "Where is the remote? This isn't creating tension, it is creating frustration." That was an honest 12-year-old boy just blurting it out.
These
Now,
kids, they're so
uh,
impatient.
I know, but that brings me to my question though, because with the way the cliffhangers are presented, and this could be an editing decision and not a direction decision, but with the moments that are created around that, do you know why, or do you feel like that should change moving into maybe season 2, given the fact that this show dropped all 8 episodes at once? It wasn't a episode on this week and an episode 2 was this week, because obviously going through these modern streaming services, all you gotta do is grab the remote and hit fast forward 10 seconds.
I mean, look, one of the driving original ideas about this show was this idea that answering a question, a general knowledge question, is an intensely dramatic subject. If you can think of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, countless shows, the answering of a question provides drama, because answering a question is inherently dramatic. And what we were able to do with this series was to put that out into the world, was to place questions around the world, so that instead of being in a studio or in a game show set, you've got the same tension and drama, but you're out in the world and with all that has to offer with it. So that this point that you're bringing up comes down to the very thing that this show is about, which is the drama of answering a question. And that's why it's at the end of the show. That's why we eke it out. It's an intensely dramatic moment, whether they know it or whether they don't know it. And, you know, in the edits, we're always trying to create the stories so that it moves towards the most dramatic element. And that simply is it. It's the most dramatic element. There are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds on this simple question. And I can tell you, if he got bored waiting for the little dots to go by, he should have been on location, because those dots, it actually takes like a minute and a half or something to play out that thing. And we're shooting all the time. We're shooting all of it. The frustration on the faces of the contestants as they wait for these dots to go by is intense. And but we need the angles. We need those moments. We need to record all of that so that in an edit we can compress it down to, you know, the most dramatic element. Nevertheless, maybe it's done too much. Maybe on a couple of occasions we draw it out too much, and it's not as dramatic as we think it is. But I suspect that's a young lad thinking, I either know or don't know the answer to that. And you know what? I've got my phone here, and get on with it, guys. He just wants quicker storytelling.
Yeah, and I think it's a generational thing as well, but and I'm not going to excuse it away to just that, but it comes down to the fact that just as we have changed from, because I think you and I are probably similar age, you know, we had cable growing up. There was no fast forward button. There was no skip to the next thing or the next chapter. You had to wait. You had to sit through commercials that you didn't want to see just to be able to see that moment of surprise and that tension. And I feel like because we have shifted to the streaming services, because it is instant gratification, is there maybe a better way of going about it for season 2?
By leaving the story at another moment, or by not playing to the gallery with a big tense ending. You just think perhaps there's a way of
possibly, maybe you go to the dots, but rather than linger on the dots for 30 seconds, you actually cut to another contestant group, tell a few minutes of their story, and then come back, and it's a 5-second, now we got the answer. So I feel like that's where, you know, because that's something that we talked about after he said that. Of course, I had to question him because he is from a different generation than I am, and I don't want to leave those people out, because those are the types of people that I feel like this show is trying to reach out and grab. Not people like me who has an entire collection of James Bond stuff behind him, but people who don't.
It's worth thinking about. You know, we talked earlier about having potentially more difficult challenges which could involve
Yeah.
pairs going out. You know, if
Yeah.
if in the shooting challenge in episode 8 in Switzerland, you know, those are dramatic moments that aren't involving questions. You know, I think if we concentrate on creating dramatic moments, whether it's questions or challenges or whatever's or personal even, like those are also moments at which you could end shows. And I don't think we're committed to doing it in any kind of format or style. We always look at material for what is intense and dramatic. And if we find those dramatic elements in other places of the show, there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't be endings, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's worth taking on board. And, you know, it's always what we're trying to do is to create drama, create entertainment, and create, you know, suspense and tension.
Understand, I enjoyed season 1. Not only just for the fact that it was something James Bond in between movies, but also for the fact that, like I said before, this opens the door. We're now stepping into that realm of, okay, we're doing something James Bond related that is different, that is familiar, but is new to the franchise. And those possibilities excite me. So now talking about season 2, can you tell us, Jamie, will you be returning? Are you able to let the cat out of the bag on that? Or have you been in some pre-production meetings?
You know, I can't even say, like, I know there are moves afoot, there are ideas going on, there are conversations being had. Some of that is above my pay grade. I'd like to think I'll be back for season 2. I can't confirm it, but I think there's a possibility of it. And I suspect it's going to happen sooner rather than later because there's an appetite for what we're doing. Yeah, I look forward to it, whatever happens. And my feeling is positive. My feeling is like it's probably it's on the way, is what I'll say. But I can't, you know, I'm not the person to confirm or deny.
You heard it here first, guys. Jamie Goold, season 2, 007 Road to Million. We don't know.
No,
It's up in the
no,
air.
but we think we know, but we don't know.
Jamie, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming in, sitting down and having this conversation. It's been a lot of fun, a lot more about the show, being able to have a more open and free conversation. So thank you for that. For everybody at home, thanks so much for watching. And as always, Merry Christmas, 007.